about now?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to keep the chat window here open. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. This is our third consecutive online Ionic meetup, and we're very happy to do this. This was a highly requested topic. Like we always say, please reach out either on the meetup page or through our Twitter. Any topic you guys are interested in, please let us know, and we'll be more than happy to schedule it accordingly. We'll be listening in to your feedback. And yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So for those who don't know me, my name is Claudio. I've been a developer at OpenForge for 3 years. And I've been a long time Ionic user. I started using Ionic back with AngularJS, so it's been quite a bit. And I already mentioned it, but just as a heads up for those who are joining us for the first time, we typically like to use Angular. However, here at OpenForge, we've been using React more and more. So if we notice that people want to see some more React content, we might start putting some more of that in the future. So like I said, just let us know in the comments and we will be sure to check out your feedback. And with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at what we'll be covering today. So today we're going to be looking at 3 different sections. We're going to be taking a look at Notifications 101, what I call the basic facts around notifications. Now, obviously you guys already know what notifications are. So instead, we're going to be talking about some statistics, facts, things you might not know that will help you shape your notification strategy and also know whether or not notifications are right for your app, and if so, what kind of notifications those are. Next up, we're going to be covering the essentials. In here, I'm going to direct you to the resources that you need in order to implement notifications using Capacitor. However, we won't be diving into the setup process itself, just because specifically for iOS, it can be a bit meticulous. But I'm going to be sharing with you 3 great resources that personally have helped me and I believe are the most up-to-date currently about the topic. And lastly, during that section, we'll be taking a look at the push notification configuration on Capacitor briefly, and I'll be adding some remarks about good practices and what to do in those 3 little code snippets that we'll be taking a look. And lastly, we're going to be taking a look at local notifications. This was a topic that was requested by Greg here, and it's actually one that I haven't actually interacted much with myself. And for those who hang on till the end, there's going to be a little surprise, so look out for that. All right, so notifications 101. Let's start with a question. Do you like notifications? The reason I ask is that as developers, the idea of implementing push notifications just opens a whole new door towards a realm of possibilities. I mean, there's, when it comes to notification strategies, you can get really, really sophisticated, and the tools that Capacitor gives us allow us to do all sorts of things. But I'm sure that as users, I'm sure you've had some negative experiences with notifications. I personally am not a big fan. I'm actually trying to reduce my phone usage more and more throughout the day. And what I try to do is I actually leave my phone in the kitchen while I'm working, and I give myself a little break to check the notifications and whatnot. But coincidentally, while researching statistics for this talk, look at what I came across. Now here, I'm sure many people have seen this before. You go to read an article, news, what have you, and you get presented with this lovely pop-up. No scrolling, no clicking of a button, just boom, right there in front of your face. And unwitting, many times, unwitting users who just want to read through and go to the article end up clicking allow, and what they don't know is that they've actually signed themselves up to an onslaught of notifications from all these websites, and it's not very clear for a lot of users how to disable them. So to me, this is just, I mean, it's a bit assuming, even impertinent for the website to assume that this is what we want as users. In this case, what they could have done is maybe at the end of the article, they could have added a button letting the user know that if they want to subscribe for more for news and updates, they can easily allow notifications. But in this case, they did not. Yeah. Anyways, this leads us to the reality of notifications. Like we saw earlier, that was a bad use of notifications, but notifications in the end are a tool. And like any tool, they're not inherently bad or good. It's all depending on how you use them. If used properly, they can help you retain users and also add value to your app. And in the last section, I'm going to be showing you some examples of how to do just that. The end goal, however, should be to make your users happy. Even if they're not a fan of notifications, like I said, they have the option of whether or not they would like to opt in, and that ends up producing a positive experience for those who did want them and those who did not want them. Before showing you how to use notifications, I'm going to show you three sobering statistics, just to ground the expectations that you have for notifications, using them in your app, and also knowing sort of what users experience on a day-to-day basis. So the first is that on average, the US smartphone receives 46 notifications a day. That is a lot. And not only does it mean that you're going to be running the risk of cluttering the user's lock screen, a lot of times users have their preferred apps, and those are typically the ones they look out for in their lock screen. And if they see one that is not the one they wanted, that can that contrast can just lead them to ignore your notifications. And if you try to up the frequency in an attempt to get them to interact more, we see that just adding one weekly notification, if your users are not interacting with them, it can lead to them either disabling it, or even worse, for those who either don't know or just are plain annoyed by your app, they'll just stop using it. And lastly, like I mentioned earlier, as developers, the prospect that notifications bring is very exciting, but the reality is that most users don't actually find them useful. So I hope that this leads you to reconsider whether or not notifications are a good fit for your app. In order to help you do this, I've boiled down three kinds of notifications. Now, a website that I visited prior to the talk was claiming that, well, they said that there were around 35. Just to make it easier, I boiled it down to 3. And I think that if you apply my definitions, you can usually fit any notification into any of these 3. The first of these is what I like to call passive notifications. And these are the notifications that a user might expect to get throughout the day. For example, you have your Instagram likes, you have your comments, messages from Slack, Facebook, anything really. But in other words, these are notifications that the user might want to see. These won't annoy users much because this is something that they've either signed up or through continued usage of them, and they're not disabling them. They've learned to live with them, so they'll either go in or they'll just swipe and dismiss it. The next category is what I like to call, one caveat that I added is that with these notifications, especially when it comes to the likes and comments and retweets, for example, I would highly recommend either replacing the concept of the notifications if the user disables them, or enhancing your app through the use of an activity feed. And this can be easily done if you, depending on how you implement notifications in your backend, you can also create a document that specifies the activity that was included in that notification. And what that does is that for users like me, for example, where I just swipe and clear my lock screen often, especially in the morning. Sometime later throughout the day, I'll go to my activity feed and I'll check out what I missed. All right, so next up we have what I call active notifications. Active notifications, they're rare. These notifications are what really add value to your app, in my opinion. The most common examples of these are, let's say if you're using a to-do app, maybe you set it up with a reminder, and what it'll say is you've completed this reminder. Would you like to mark it as done, or would you like to snooze it? There's the word. Another really good example of these are location-based. So let's say, for example, you have an app for selling event tickets. Let's say that I happen to be in a city visiting where there's a venue who is having a show soon. Well, if I enable location services on the app, then that would be a perfect opportunity for the app to present me with a discount for that venue. So I wasn't really a fan of the name active. I think what really communicates the concept behind these notifications is the icon. It really just hits the mark. It's something that the user didn't expect, but it's something they liked seeing. All right, the next type, like I alluded to with the screenshot of the statistics website, so I like to call it toxic notifications. These are notifications that, in short, make the user question, why am I seeing this? And I'll show you guys a screenshot where I happen to capture all three, where in this case, it was the New York Times. The New York Times, so I'm a reader of the New York Times. I like the paper. I'll go through it in the morning, and I typically won't check out the app at all unless I want to do like the crossword puzzle on the go or something. But unless it's something like a really breaking news, something that I would otherwise find out through my Twitter feeds or my Google News feed, then it's something that I really don't want to see. And actually, after taking that screenshot, I went ahead and disabled them because I realized that I wasn't using them a lot. The rest on the top, as you can see, those are your passive notifications. We have notifications from services like Snapchat, Messenger, and my email. They're not necessarily, it wasn't any pressing matters, but sometimes I click into them, sometimes I just remove them. The active one here, interestingly enough, is after I took the screenshot, I noticed that it popped up and it brought me right to the gallery where I shared it to myself so I can put it into this presentation. So this is the perfect example for an active notification, because I personally wasn't expecting it, but I really enjoyed seeing it. And even though this is an OS feature, I'm sure you guys can think of ways to sort of sneak in a notification in there, and if the user really likes seeing it, then they'll end up tapping it. And all right, I hope that everything that I've said so far has sort of given you an idea of what to expect from users, what they want, and also when it comes to the context of your own app. If you see an opportunity for any of these, just make sure that you categorize them accordingly to what type of notification they are. And lastly, before moving on to the next section, I want to leave you with 3 general tips to better implement notifications. The first is that you should really schedule your send times. The research shows that between 7 and 10 a.m. in the morning and between 6 and 10 p.m. in the evening are the best times to send notifications. However, I encourage you to do your own research with analytics and also A/B testing if you have that available to you. The next is deep linking. Like we saw in the example with the screenshot, I just clicked on the notification and I was brought right to where I wanted to be in the gallery. And last, just make them relevant. Don't be implementing toxic notifications. Make sure that the user, when they see your notification, it makes sense and it's something that they actually want to see. Don't don't take advantage of the opportunity that notifications give you, which is a direct window to reach your user. Because if you misuse this power, they will stop using your app. All right, now I haven't been taking a look at the chat, so let me see if we got any questions or comments. Oh, I hate those. Yeah, I hate them as well. All right. Well, if there are no questions or comments, let's move right ahead. So, like I mentioned earlier in the table of contents, the setup process for push notifications, especially for iOS, can be a little tricky, and you really have to follow the instructions to the letter in order to get them right. And it can be a little frustrating figuring out what's wrong, debugging. So I'm sharing with you 3 of my favorite resources when it comes to notifications nowadays. The first is a guide by Simon Grimm. If you guys are fans of Ionic, maybe you've seen him on Twitter. He, through his Ionic Academy, or Didactic in this case, he offers some really, really great Ionic content. So I really encourage you to check out his guide. He walks you through implementing push notifications with Capacitor. He walks you through the whole iOS setup process, generating keys, certificates, and all that jazz. But it's done really, really well, and it's helped me personally. The next is Fireship.io. You guys are Angular fans. This is a platform that Jeff Delaney, a Google developer expert, has started, and he's been providing awesome Ionic and Ionic, Angular, and Firebase content, and as of late, even React. And do want to mention, however, Simon's guide, I believe, is paid content. I highly recommend getting a subscription. It's there's a bunch of stuff that he puts out constantly: how to use Ionic animations, how to set up slides, shopping cart, all great examples with text and video content. But if you want a free alternative, I recommend checking out the guide for setting up notifications with Firebase on Ionic's Capacitor documentation. And last thing before moving on, some of you mentioned earlier that you only use them on PWAs. If you want to try a hybrid approach with your apps where you have native and PWA, I recommend you checking this video. And I went ahead and published the slides on the Meetup page, which include the links to all these resources. And all right, moving right along. We're going to be taking a look at 3 essential snippets that make notifications work inside of your Angular app. So here we have the request permission method. Now, I made a mistake in my own application where I got notifications to work. It felt great. And what I did initially was I created a service where I did this requested permission, and I did this all within the app component or in the init method. I did it because I didn't know any better. I just wanted to make sure that users were getting that the permission pop up, and if they did, that they had the notification features enabled with my app. However, now that I know better, I instead moved this to the button that they would have to click in order for them to receive notifications. So in other words, they're trying to do something, and the app is letting them know that this is going to require notifications, and if they want to go ahead and give permission, then they can do that. All right, next up we have the 2 event listeners. The first is for the registration success. What this does is that after the user says yes and agrees to have notifications, you will have a token. This token you will use and you will store it somewhere, maybe in the backend, and this is what you will use to send notifications to that device specifically. And if you're using Firebase, I believe it's called FCM services, you can also use that token to register a specific device to a topic, which will broadcast notification to multiple devices. And I also included here the registration error because you never know when something might go wrong, and it's always good to inform the user that they're not when they're not going to get the notifications because something went wrong. So in this, I recommend adding an alert, letting them know to check their settings, and also if you've used Capacitor's device plugin, I believe you can check whether or not they are enabled. And I'll show you guys once we do the live demo how you can display that. Lastly, we have two listeners. The first is for when the device actually receives a notification. And the next is for when an action is performed by clicking on the notification itself. We're going to talk a little bit more about this after I show you guys the live demo using local notifications, but just keep that in the back of your head. So now I'm gonna switch my screen so you guys can see the live demo I have prepared for you guys. Let me just pull it up. Actually, before I share, let me make sure I got it running and I got Visual Studio up as well. All right, sharing my screen. And you guys should see the Android emulator. So what we have here is 4 types of, well, they're not really types, but 4 different implementations of the local notifications. And it's super, super easy to set them up. But just to show you guys how it works, I just press the basic notification, and right there we see we have a spot for the title, spot for the content, and what more can you ask for? You have a notification working. So let me show you guys what it looks like on the code. Oh, it looks like I have to share a different screen. All right. Notification service, share. Awesome. So here you guys are looking at the notification service I created. And if you've ever worked with Capacitor before, it's super, super easy. Just import the plugins and take the plugin that you want to use. And I mentioned earlier that with push notifications, the setup with iOS was a little meticulous. In this case, it's really not. It's super simple. Unless you want to dive into the more platform-specific configuration for Android, there's something else you might have to do for the image, sound, and vibration, I believe, for the Android configuration. But all it really takes, it's very similar to the push. You check if they're enabled, you request permission, and if they have permission, all I did is I stored that into a property in the service. But this is essentially what it looks. We have the methods for triggering the basic notification you just saw, and here the body is really simple. You have your title, body, and ID properties. The ID property is really useful for managing your notifications internally. There are methods that the plugin provides for clearing the notifications. One common behavior for this is once the user enters your app, and maybe if you did an activity feed, like I mentioned before, maybe if the user clicks on one of those activity items, you associate those with the notification you have scheduled, and you can go ahead and clear that right up so it leaves their lock screen. Here again, we have a similar concept with the multiple notifications. I can show you. It's a little hard to switch back and forth, but let me show you what that looks like. Here we have the multiple notifications show up. Here's the first, here's the second, and having a little trouble getting rid of that. Cool. And you notice that the method says schedule on the code. As you know, this is for scheduling notifications at a specific time. This one right here, I scheduled it for a couple seconds. So there it goes. Here's a message from the past. Ain't that cool? And there's one more notification. All right, I'll get back to your question in a second, but let me show you guys the last notification. Now, I mentioned previously that a common passive notification type was that of a message when you get a message from Facebook or Slack more commonly. With local notifications, you can enable actions that receive inputs. And here we have three options. We have the option to actually reply with text, or we have an option to establish predefined responses. Let me switch back to the code and show you what that looks like. Very nice. So here we have the schedule input method. And you'll notice that the only thing I added here was an action type ID. And what this is an ID, is an action type that I registered through a listener, which is going to be listening for an action performed event. Similarly, like in the push notifications, this will trigger once the actor takes an action within the notification. And in this case, I am listening to the reply event. And as you'll see in the demo, the response in this event was stopped, but if we go ahead and trigger it again, we can go ahead and input a response. Sure, I'd love to get lunch. Hope he invites me to lunch soon. And there you go. There's a response. And you can use that to go ahead and actually send the message on the thread that the user was participating. And with just these four options, there's already a lot you can do. I'm sure depending on what kind of applications you build, you'll find separate uses. But there's one more thing, and that is a surprise that you all have been waiting for. Now, think of these. Think of the input notification, for instance. In order to do that properly, you would have to actually listen to an event from your database. You need to listen to an event from when someone actually types in the group and sends a message there. You can't just schedule it from within. It's not like the user is going to receive a message at a specific time. So how do you do this? Well, let me go back to the presentation and show you guys what is available for you guys to use. New share. What's going on? New share. Chrome notifications. All right, you see it. So if you're using Firebase FCM Messages, there's two types of messages you can use. You can use the typical notification message, which the interface has a lot of options that you can use. For example, I like to set priority levels on my notifications on my app. This helps the device save battery and also determine how to display those. And there's also options to implement maybe rich media notifications. You can implement data, add attachments, and do all sorts of things. However, the only thing is that with these types of notifications, they will always be shown. They'll always be received by the app automatically, and there's nothing you can do about that. However, we see right there at the bottom with a data message, the app is responsible for processing those messages. And that right there gives us the key to combine the power of push and local notifications. On the one hand, you would have your push data message letting the client know that a new message is available in the thread that a user is participating in. And then what the app can do is schedule a local notification right there in that listener and display that and then handle it accordingly. And that, my friends, was the surprise I wanted to give you. And that is it. Now, let me take a look at the chat. I believe there was a couple questions there that I needed to ask. Does your application need to be running to receive notifications? Great question. With both data and the notification types, your app can be killed entirely and they will still receive them. However, if you're using local notifications, I believe that your app does need to be running in the background at least. And if anyone else has any questions, is it necessary to change the notifications to APN or FCM if the device is Android or iOS? That is a great question. Uh, for this, I highly recommend checking out either Capacitor's guide on notifications. I don't believe this is the case. The only thing that you have to consider if you're sending these from a function on Firebase, you do need to specify a specific attribute, a property on the notification message for a topic, I believe, with APN. But if you don't do that, your notifications should still go through just fine on iOS and Android automatically. But like I said, make sure to check out those resources. They'll walk you through the platform-specific configurations and anything you need to do in order to get them working. All right. Any more questions? What is the relationship between FCM and capacitor? I'm confused as to what capacitor actually is. So capacitor is the bridge that Ionic uses in order to get your web application and enables you to target native platforms. It'll take your Ionic app and turn it into an iOS Ionic app or an Android Ionic app. FCM, on the other hand, is the service that Firebase uses to send out messages. There's other services like OneSignal, for example, which once you have that token that we saw earlier in the registration event, you pass it on along to them and then they handle the sending of the notification. Capacitor, in this case, only receives them and lets you handle them however you want. Capacitor uses Firebase, but can we choose to have Firebase in Europe? I believe so. I don't see, whenever I set up new Firebase projects, you specify the zone of where you want to operate. So I don't think there are any restrictions, but again, I would recommend checking that out specifically for Europe. One interesting thing. If you force app shutdown, you will stop receiving notifications. Yes, that happens with... I came across that before, but I remember solving it. Like I said, local notifications, I believe you do need to be running in the background at least, but for push, I'm pretty sure the notifications should still be received by your app. Yes, thank you, Todd. Does it cost a lot of money to send lots of notifications? Well, it does if you're sending a whole lot of them. If you're broadcasting notifications as in topics, like I mentioned earlier, if you have a lot of users and a lot of them are subscribed to that notification channel, then yes, eventually once your user base grows enough, it's going to cost money to send those, which is why I recommend sending them to the tokens specifically. It makes them more personalized. And also with local notifications, you don't necessarily have to listen in to push notification events, but you could also be listening in if you're using Firebase, maybe to like a value change on a collection or a document, and then you can prompt that to trigger or schedule a local notification, which will save you money. So you have to set up Firebase before Capacitor. 1 million free, I'm not sure, but yeah, you do have to do that. All right, well, keep them coming. Here for a couple more minutes. If not, really want to thank you guys for joining in. This was a really fun topic to research. And like I said before, if you guys want to see specific content, let us know in the meetup page what you want to see. If you want to keep discussing the notifications, feel free to comment on the page and I'll take a look. Let me know if you need anything else from the slides you didn't receive. And as always, thanks for watching. All right, I'll see you guys. Thank you.